Hello, welcome everyone. Today we're going to look at some common yoga poses. These are the Hatha yoga poses you're going to see repeated most often throughout my classes. And today we're going to go a little slower. I'll offer more instruction, more variations and modifications of these poses so that you can begin to explore them and adapt them to your own body's unique needs. We're also going to play with transitions, specifically from standing to the floor and then from the floor back to standing, which is also something that happens frequently in yoga classes, that we do some standing poses, come to the floor, maybe go back up, maybe lie down. So being able to transition with ease and safety is really important. You're going to need a few props for this class. I recommend that you have a blanket, a pillow, and a chair. And you might want a couple of extra blankets or pillows. It's really going to depend on your body, but at minimum, one blanket, one pillow, one chair. All right, so we're going to stand at the top of the mat to begin the class, but let's arrange our props for a moment so we don't have to worry about them later. I'm just going to fold the blanket up into a small rectangle. This is going to be used to pad the knees or wrists when we're on hands and knees. So something about that size and shape will work beautifully. And then you can set that to the side because you're not going to need it right at the beginning. You can also set the pillow to the side. And then for the chair, let's place it at the top of the mat with the two front legs facing the mat. So the seat of the chair is facing the mat, two front legs on the mat for stability and support. And now we'll come into our first standing pose, mountain pose. I like to do mountain pose with the feet about hip distance apart. Sometimes in more traditional lineages of yoga, it's taught with the feet close together, big toes touching, ankle bones touching. I find that a little less stable. It feels better on my body to have the feet hip distance apart. And if you're wondering how to find hip distance apart, I like to feel the front of the pelvis. These are the bones that stick out the front of the pelvis here, the hip points, and then the feet fall directly under those bones. Now, for some of us, you might want to separate the feet an inch or two wider than that, or an inch or two narrower. Play around, experiment, see what feels the most comfortable in your body right now. But the feet are parallel, toes pointing forward. Begin to sense the ground under the feet. Trying to distribute the weight evenly between the two feet. And then let's everyone give the knees a little bend, just to soften them. And then begin to straighten the legs as much as you can without hyperextending, without locking the knees back. So that you might have to give them a tiny little micro bend if you're someone like me that has a tendency to just hang in the ligaments at the back of the knee. And then there's one more adjustment I want you to explore coming into mountain pose, and this will help us to get the spine into a neutral alignment. So let's notice the glutes, the back of the hips, and we're going to clench the glutes. So squeeze your bum. And then draw the lower belly in slightly. So imagine that you're trying to button up a pair of pants that might be a little too snug. So there's this engagement and drawing in of the belly. See if you can maintain that feeling in the belly and relax the glutes. Unclench the hips. And then bring the arms down by your sides. And see what happened in the spine there. So for me, I feel like the spine is in more neutral alignment. I have a tendency to dump the front of the pelvis forward, hang in the back of the knees, chest is forward, and this is actually not a neutral position for the spine. So I need to engage the muscles of the core to keep the head over the shoulders and the shoulders over the rib cage over the pelvis. pelvis over the heels. And you might not need to do that if that work of clenching the glutes, engaging the stomach, and then relaxing the glutes doesn't feel right in your body. Just notice the alignment of ears over shoulders, shoulders over hips, hips over heels. Rooting down through the feet and growing tall out of the crown of your head. Mountain pose, Tadasana. And there is another reason why Tadasana is such a powerful pose. It's not just a foundational standing pose in yoga, but by coming into this neutral alignment, all of the muscles and bones and structure of the body is functioning more efficiently. When we come out of this balance, when maybe we poke the head forward or the hips back, or we have some postural misalignment like that, the muscles and the bones of the body have to work harder. Your posture, your ligaments have to work harder to hold you upright. And that can create patterns of tension and pain. So finding this neutral alignment, this place where your body's structure is at its most efficient, is the secret benefit of mountain pose. Beautiful. And then we'll start to add a little movement here. I'm just going to turn to face you, but you can stay where you are. As you inhale, let's turn the palms of the hands forward and begin to lift the arms out to the sides, maybe as high as the horizon, maybe further, maybe continuing all the way up toward the sky. That's really going to depend on how you feel today in your shoulders. And as you exhale, bringing the arms back down, the last thing that happens is the palms face the thighs once more. So let's try that a few times. Inhale, palms forward, reach the arms out to the sides, lifting however much it's comfortable. And exhale, sweep the hands down. 2 more times like that. Inhale, palms forward, reach up, fill the body with air. Exhale, sweep the hands down. And one final time, inhaling, arms out to the horizon or higher. And exhale, back down the way you came. Hands face the thighs. Returning to mountain pose. Feeling the steadiness, the groundedness of a mountain. Now we'll practice transitioning down to the floor on hands and knees. And we can do this in a few different ways. This is why we have the chair here today, and you may or may not need the chair for this. So let's go through a couple of options together. Standing about 6-9 inches away from the chair. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side and overhead just like you did a moment ago. And as you exhale and sweep the hands out wide, start to bend the knees, hinge at the hips, let the hands land down on your thighs or the seat of the chair. So you have these options, but we're bending the knees deeply. We're bending at the hips so that the hips go back as if you're sitting on an imaginary chair behind you. So this is our chair pose. You can bring hands to hips, hands to thighs, hands to the seat of the chair. We're going to use this as our transition pose. Beautiful. So inhale, press into the feet, start to straighten the legs, come back up to mountain so that we can try that one more time. Inhale, reach the arms overhead. Exhale, hands go wide, start to bend the knees, send the hips back, land the hands wherever it's comfortable, chair. maybe thighs. And then to come to the floor, if you're going to hold on to the chair, holding on to the seat of the chair, bringing one knee down and then the other, and then one hand, the other hand. You might want to take a few steps back so that you're in the center of your mat. And here you are on hands and knees. Now, I'll show you what that looks like if you don't use the chair. Arriving in mountain pose. Inhale, reach the arms overhead. Exhale, begin to bend the knees, hinging at the hips. I'm going to take my hands to the thighs and then both hands over to one thigh. So I'm going to take both hands stacked over to the left thigh so that I can bring the right knee down, the hands down, and the left knee down. So either way works, just getting down to the floor and then adjusting in your space. You might have to crawl back a little bit. And here we are on hands and knees. So this position, tabletop position, is the foundation of all of these hands and knees type poses. And we do a few of them in this program. So cat and cow, spinal balance, child's pose, all of them come from this base. But this base can be a little bit challenging for some. So if the knees are talking to you, if they're feeling a little tender, I recommend placing a folded blanket under the knees. Nothing too thick, but a nice square of a blanket works really well. And you can do that anytime you come down to your knees. If the wrists are talking to you, you could place another folded blanket or towel or roll the top of your mat down to pad the wrists. Or you can come to fists, so you could tuck the fingers under, keep the thumbs extended, resting on the knuckles. This is always a beautiful option here. Or you can come all the way down to your forearms, placing elbows under the shoulders, hands out in front, either palm down or palm up. You can always come to this variation. It does look different, but it has the same purpose. None of these are better or worse than the other, so find what works for you. And when you come into a stable tabletop position, let's begin to inhale, lift the tailbone. Let the belly soften down, heart shines forward, look forward. Here's your cow pose. And as you exhale, begin to lower the tail. So tilt the tail down toward the floor and then also the head. And you'll note here today that I'm not going for a hugely rounded spine here. That's going to be up to you. If you're dealing with any tenderness in the back, any osteoporosis, anything relating to spinal health, I recommend that you don't come into a big arch through the spine. So it's fine to arch the spine down, lifting head and tail, just based on the structure and the anatomy of the spine. This is a healthier position for most of us. And then as you exhale, just lower head and tail, keeping the rest of the spine relatively neutral. Inhale, lifting head and tail. Exhale, lower. So here's your cat and cow. It's a wonderful way to warm up the spine, to articulate each vertebra. And then finding a place between these two positions, arched and tucked, somewhere in the middle is your neutral spine. Beautiful. And then let's bring the big toes together and separate the knees a little further than they were and begin to sit the hips back, coming into child's pose, extending the arms out in front, lowering the head and chest close to the floor. Maybe the head will even touch down. And I'm going to offer you a few variations here in child's pose because, again, it's not comfortable for everyone, even though it's considered a resting pose. So option one, if the shoulders are talking to you here, you can always bend the elbows, stack the hands, rest the forehead down in the hands. Elbows are wide. This is a really lovely version of child's pose. If it's the hips and knees that are talking to you, maybe you don't lower down as far. So you can keep the knees a little closer together, just lower the hips back as far as it's comfortable. Maybe, and this is where the pillow comes in handy, you tuck the pillow behind the hips, so between the hips and the heels. Just gives you a little bit of extra support there. But again, you might stay lifted. Maybe you want 2 pillows under the hips. Maybe your child's pose is up here, and that's okay. Lastly, the most traditional version of child's pose is to bring the knees and feet together and bring the arms down by the feet, lowering the crown of the head to the floor. This is going to be a little bit deeper of a shape, but feel free to try it. This is all about experimenting, seeing what would it feel like if I did this. So I invite you to find a version of child's pose that works for you for a couple of breaths. I like knees wide apart, toes together, and I like to bend the elbows and stack the hands. Very nice. And when you're ready, coming back to tabletop, hands and knees. We're going to practice one more pose from this spot. So as you inhale, take the right leg back behind you, tuck the toes under, so you're on the ball of the back foot, reach back through the heel and feel the openness and length in the back of the right leg. This might be plenty. If you want, though, you can start to float the back foot off the mat. Maybe it's an inch or 2. Maybe it's as high as the hip. We're not going to go higher than the hip today, but as high as the hip. Maybe you take opposite arm, send it straight forward, thumb points up to the sky. Spinal balance. So you'll notice if you take the hand and foot off the ground, it really is a balanced pose. The core muscles are all having to stabilize here to keep us in this position, which is a really, really great functional way of strengthening the core and the back. But of course, there's lots of variations. So maybe you keep the toes on the ground. Maybe you keep the toes on the ground but lift the hand. Maybe you keep the hand on the ground but lift the leg. So you play around, you decide. Everyone's going to keep drawing gently in through the lower belly, both hip points in the front pointing to the floor. Beautiful. Lower hand, lower knee. We'll try that to the other side. Send the left toes back behind you. Pause, reach back through the heel. Again, remember the options with the wrists if they're starting to talk to you. Maybe you come to soft fists here. Maybe you're going to stay down on your elbows and just work on lifting the leg. If you're in a place where you want to lift the foot off the earth, maybe floating it in line with the hip, maybe taking opposite arm forward, thumb pointing up. And one other thing I'll mention is the wrists, while they are sensitive sometimes in this hands and knees position, they will get stronger with time. And as the outer shoulder and the latissimus gets stronger, this is the outer rib cage, that area will take a lot of the force, so it won't go into the wrist. Good. Lower hand, lower knee. We're going to come back into a child's pose, whatever variation. Maybe you want to change the variation. Try another one. Extending the arms out in front of you. Gently pressing the fingertips down. Lift the palms of the hand just to come off the wrist for a moment. So you're making a little tent under each palm. Very nice. So now we'll practice downward facing dog. I'm going to move the blanket. So this is a nice time to take the blanket away. And there are a lot of versions of downward facing dog as well. Why don't you watch me first? I'll show you all three and then you can play with the different variations. So if you're going to come into the most traditional form of downward facing dog from child's pose, you begin to tuck the toes under, lift the hips up toward the ceiling, coming into this upside down V shape. Arms are long, spine is long, but the knees can stay bent. So the focus of downward facing dog is never on the legs. It's on the spine and the shoulders. So I like to keep the heels lifted, bend the knees, so I can really elongate from the hips to the hands. Some people like to bend one knee and then the other knee. So here's downward facing dog, option 1. Option 2, you're going to come forward toward the chair. Bringing the hands to the chair, stepping one foot up, the other foot up, and then walking both feet back, coming into downward facing dog using the chair. So hands rest on either side of the seat of the chair. Again, keeping the knees bent so that you can keep the spine long. So if you notice that you're rounding through the spine here, if the legs are straight, bend them so you can lengthen from the tail to the hands. So that's option 2, coming up slowly, walking the feet toward the chair, bending the knees to stand up. Option 3 we did last week. You can turn the chair around so that you're going to face the back of the chair. Hands to the back of the chair, walk the feet back. Again, little bend to the knees if you notice you're rounding. Any of these options is a wonderful variation of downward facing dog, creating space and length through the spine and the shoulders, stretching the whole back side of the body. So come into the variation you think will work best for you today. We'll just hold for 2 breaths. So I'm going to come to the floor because that works for me. From your heart, let your arms get longer no matter where you are. From your hips, let your legs get longer. Keep the head balanced between the upper arms. So if you notice that you're letting the head hang, try to draw it so the ears are in line with the biceps. And wherever you are, start to look forward. Walking the feet up either to the back of the chair or the top of the mat, and then bending the knees deeply, sinking the hips low wherever you are. Hands to heart, press into the feet, rise all the way up. And here we are, mountain pose once more. Feet about hip distance apart. Spine is long. Arms relaxed by your sides. And now we'll practice crescent lunge or crescent warrior. We also did this last week. So we did it with the chair. This week we can do it with the chair or without the chair. If you're gonna stand with the chair, let's stand about 6 inches away from the back of the chair. Hands resting on the back of the chair. If you're not gonna use the chair today, they're gonna rest by your sides in mountain pose. Begin to shift all your weight over into the left leg. And take a really big step back with the right. So again, you could be using the chair for balance or not. Back heel stays lifted. And then we'll settle into this shape in the hips. trying to draw the torso upright so spine is neutral, just like mountain pose. You might need to bend the back knee a little just to let the tailbone be heavy toward the earth. Maybe once you do that little adjustment, maybe then you're able to straighten the leg and maintain this neutral spine reaching upright. You can keep hands to hips, hands to the back of the chair, or if you want today, reaching one or both arms overhead. Bending into the front knee, crescent warrior or crescent lunge. It has many names. Noticing where you feel this. Is it the front of the right hip? Is it the left thigh that's strength building here to hold us upright? And to come out of the pose, you're going to shift all your weight into that front foot. Take a big step up now so both feet are parallel once more. Mountain pose. All right, second side. Switch all your weight now into the right foot. Take a big step back with the left, resting on the ball, the back foot, heel lifted. And then drawing the spine upright. So if you notice that you're leaning forward, can you bring the crown of the head toward the sky? Maybe you need to bend the back knee a little. Let the tailbone point toward the floor. Let the front hip points gently lift away from the front thigh. Again, hands can be to the back of the chair this whole time. If you want, lifting the arms to the ceiling. Soften the shoulders down away from the ears. And then shifting the weight forward, step the left foot up, mountain pose. Very nice. All right, so we're going to step toward the long edge of the mat. So we're facing the long edge. Feet are very wide apart. So maybe 2, 3, even 4 feet apart. It's really going to depend on your size and shape. And the toes are pointing forward to the long edge of the mat. So your feet are parallel to the short edge of the mat. You want to be wide enough that you feel this sensation of groundedness in the feet, that it's a challenging enough stance for you, that you feel a little openness, but not so wide that you feel stuck, like you're going to collapse or you can't get out of the pose. So this is too wide for me. I feel like I can't get out of the pose. So if that's the case, you're just going to walk your feet in a little bit closer. Let's bring the hands to the hips. Now pay attention to the left foot. We're going to turn the left foot out so that the toes point to the short edge of the mat now. And then that heel, the front foot, is in line with the arch or the heel of the back foot. The back foot can stay where it is, parallel to the short edge of the mat, or you can turn the toes in toward the midline, maybe 20 or 30 degrees. It's really going to depend on your ankle, knee, and hip, how that feels. So you have the choice anywhere in this range. And then press the feet down. Inhale, lengthen the spine up. And exhale, we're going to start to bend into the front knee. This is the left knee. Letting the knee track in line with that second toe. So we have a tendency to let the knee cave in. Try to let it line up with the second toe. And then let's inhale, straighten the leg, come back up. Good, let's try that again. Exhale, bend the knee. Inhale, lengthen. Exhale, bend, and now we'll hold. Bending into that front knee, pressing back through the outer edge of the back foot. And then you can float the arms parallel to the earth, so in line with the horizon. Hands are soft. And here's your Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2. It's a very common standing pose in yoga. And the hips, they're not facing the long edge of the mat and they're not facing the front of the mat. They're somewhere in between. And again, that's going to look different for all of us, but they're floating in a comfortable place somewhere in between, facing the long edge and the short edge. You can turn your gaze to look over the front fingertips. Warrior two. Cultivating a sense of strength and power. The inner stability of the warrior. And when you're ready, bringing hands to hips, straighten the front leg. Rotate the feet so the toes face the long edge of the mat once more. And we'll try that to the second side. Turning the right foot out so the toes face the back edge of the mat, the short edge. And then noticing that back foot now, this is the left foot. Does it want to stay where it is? Do you want to turn it in? I like to turn it in about 20 degrees or so. So I have this little angle in, this leg is rotating in. And then bend the front knee. Watching to see where that knee goes. So mine was caving in toward the big toe. I'm just going to draw it back so that it's in line with the second or third toe. And inhale, straighten the leg. Good. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. Just getting the joints used to the shape before we hold. One more time, bend. And straighten. And then bending the knee and easing into warrior two. Floating the arms parallel to the earth if that's comfortable for you. You can always keep the hands at the hips if the shoulders are fatiguing. Rooting through the back edge of that back foot and the big toe and the outer edge of the front foot. So keep those areas rooted to the earth. Beautiful. And then hands to hips. Straighten the leg. Rotate the feet. Toes point to the long edge of the mat. And then bring heels together, toes together, heels together, toes together to walk the feet back in to your mountain pose. Returning to this sense of stability, this grounded mountain pose. And now we'll transition to the floor for just a couple more poses. I'm going to turn the chair around again so the seat is facing me. And we'll transition just like we did at the beginning of class, practicing the standing to the earth transition. Inhale, reach the arms overhead. Exhale, as the hands go wide, begin to bend the knees, hinge at the hips. Hands either rest to thighs or the edge of the chair. And then one knee down, hands down, other knee down. Walk yourself back away from the chair. We're not going to be using that anymore. So I'm going to walk back toward the back edge of the mat. And then I'm going to walk myself over to the left edge of the mat. Let the hips sink down toward the right. So I'm coming down onto the right hip. Extend the right arm and roll onto your back. You'll probably have to readjust yourself onto your mat. But that's a nice way to transition all the way down to your back. When you get to the floor, let's keep the knees bent, soles of the feet down. Legs, knees, feet, they're all still about hip distance apart. And then bringing the hands down by your sides, palms face the earth. Press your feet down into the earth. Inhale and begin to lift the hips, the lower back and the middle back off the earth. Coming into bridge pose. And then as you exhale, roll the spine down one vertebra at a time. And we'll do that one more time, pressing into the feet, lift the hips however much it's comfortable. So maybe you're floating just an inch or so off the earth, maybe more. Maybe lifting the hips up as high as you can. We'll hold here for just a cycle of breath. So inhale, nice and smooth. Exhale long. Inhale one more time. And then exhale, begin to roll the spine back down. Beautiful. Separate the feet now wider than your hips. Arms can come out into a T shape by your sides. And we'll just let the knees drop an inch or so or more over to the right. And then bring them back through center. Let them drop over to the left. And then come back through center. So a gentle motion like the windshield wiper blades on the car, letting the knees swish from side to side. Nice and slow. Working within a range that feels comfortable and stable. It might be bigger or smaller than my range today. It's perfectly natural. Maybe when the knees move over toward the right, you want to turn the head toward the left. And maybe as the knees go to the left, you want to turn the head to the right. Just noticing if that's something that your body is craving. What would it be like if you tried that? And then bringing the knees back up to center. From here, we'll begin to straighten the legs, straighten the arms, coming into Shavasana, corpse pose. And in the traditional version of this pose, legs and arms are straight. You're lying on the floor on your back. But this shape might not work for everyone. So if you'd like, use any props to make yourself comfortable. I like to take a pillow, place it under the back of the knees. Sometimes I like a pillow under the head as well. Feel free to adjust. And we'll rest in Shavasana for just a minute or so today. Becoming aware of all the places where the body is touching the earth. Let all the weight of your body drain down into the support of the earth. You're welcome to stay here in Shavasana for 5 or 10 more minutes, however long you wish. But if you're ready to move on with your day, take a few deeper breaths, sending breath into the fingers and toes, giving them a little movement, a little wiggle. And in your own time, bending the knees. Maybe you want to move the pillow if you've had a pillow under the knees. And rolling onto your side. Extending the top leg, using the top hand to press yourself up. coming into a seat. So whether that's seated on the floor, whether it's seated on the chair, finding a moment of stillness, bringing the hands to the heart. Thank you for your practice today. Namaste.